what do we learn about how the Ark of the Covenant was moved that we didn't know from 2 Samuel? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Chronicles on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verses 16 to 29. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 16. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Chronicles chapter 15, beginning at verse 16. Then David spoke to the leaders of the Levites to appoint their brethren to be the singers accompanied by the instruments of music, stringed instruments, harps, and cymbals, by raising the voice with the resounding joy. So the Levites appointed Heman the son of Joel, and of his brethren Asaph the son of Berechiah, and of their brethren the sons of Merari, Ethan the son of Cushiah, and with them their brethren of the second rank, Zechariah, Ben, Jaziel, Shermariah-Moth, Jael, Unai, Eliab, Benaiah, Maaseiah, Matthiah, Eliphalah, Micaiah, Obed-Edom, and Jeiel, the gatekeepers. The singers, Heman, Asaph, and Ethan, were to sound the cymbals of bronze, Zechariah, Aziel, Shermariah-Moth, Jael, Uni, Eliab, Maaseiah, and Benaiah, with the strings according to Alamoth, Matthiah, Eliphalah, Micaiah, Obed-Edom, Jeiel, and Azaziah to direct with harps on the Shimnith. Chaniah, leader of the Levites, was instructor in charge of music because he was skillful. Berechiah and Elkanah were doorkeepers for the ark. Shebaniah, Joshaphat, Nethanel, Amasai, Zechariah, Benaiah, and Eliezer, the priests, were to blow the trumpets before the ark of God, and Obed-Edom and Jehiah, doorkeepers for the ark. So David, the elders of Israel, and the captains over thousands went to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord from the house of Obed-Edom with joy. And so it was, when God helped the Levites, who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that they offered 7 bulls and 7 rams. David was clothed with a robe of fine linen, as were all the Levites who bore the ark, the singers, and the Chaniah, the music master, with the singers. David also wore a linen ephod. Thus all Israel brought up the ark of the covenant of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn, with trumpets and with cymbals, making music with stringed instruments and harps. And it happened, as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came to the city of David, that Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David whirling and playing music, and she despised him in her heart. The chronicler is giving us in great detail how David unites the kingdom of Israel into one nation. If you remember back to the days of Moses and Joshua, the nation was technically one nation, but they were independently governed by tribal leaders and elders. And once they entered the promised land, each tribe largely governed itself under the directions of the priests, who were under the direction of God. If Israel had obeyed God, this would have led them to be a cohesive unit. For with God at the center, he would have been the one prospering them. He would have been the one winning their battles, for he would have strengthened their armies. And they would have, in turn, worshipped him in the tabernacle, which at that time was in Shiloh. They didn't need an earthly king to do this. They had God. However, Israel abandoned God after the days of Joshua. Now God did send them judges to call them to repent, but these judges were often regional and not national. The tabernacle was there, and the people did worship at it, but when Israel went off into idolatry, I'm sure this tabernacle worship was neglected by many. What should have been a uniting force, God, wasn't, because Israel abandoned God. Thus they remained largely divided by tribes. And so Israel asked for a king, but their first king, Saul, didn't unite them. Why? Because he didn't faithfully follow God, and so God didn't prosper him. In fact, God tore the kingdom from him because of his faithlessness. David was different, though. David not only believed in God, but through his faith, David trusted God would be with him. Why? Because God had always been with him and proved himself faithful as David obeyed God in faith. And so with a faithful man as king of Israel, God worked through David to unite Israel. David expanded Israel's territory through God. David set up a capital in the city of Jerusalem through God. And now David was going to unite the religious aspects of Israel's worship by bringing the Ark of the Covenant, that which symbolized the very presence of God, to Jerusalem. But there was one problem. David didn't consult God at first in how to do this. In this, David didn't act in faith. Because he disobeyed God, Uzzah died, because Uzzah touched the ark when the oxen stumbled, something expressly forbidden by God in Numbers 4:15. David got angry. The ark was left in the house of Obed-Edom, who we find out is Levite here. But once David learned about what his mistakes were, unlike Saul, who simply remained angry, David repented and went about correcting his mistakes. The mistake was that the ark needed to be carried by the staves on the shoulders of the sons of Kohath, not on a new ox cart. And so that's what David did. And like we saw in 2 Samuel, the occasion of bringing the ark into Jerusalem was a festive one. What we didn't get from 2 Samuel is all the details about those festivities. We knew from the last lesson that all of the Levite families were involved in moving the ark on this occasion. The priests would be leading the way. The Kohathites, at least those selected, would bear the ark. But we also saw that there were Levite singers selected, as well as Levite musicians selected to play instruments in the processions of the ark. There were Levites who were doorkeepers of the ark, in other words, persons who would protect the openings of the ark, that it should not be opened. In other words, this was a highly organized religious affair. God was at the center of it, and the priests and Levites were directing it. Sacrifices were offered in honor of God and in thankfulness for what God had done and was doing. David was dressed in a linen ephod and a robe of fine linen. These were not kingly attire, but mirrored that of the priests, showing us David's humility in this procession. The occasion was a happy one, to be sure, but not everybody was happy. For when Michal, David's wife and Saul's daughter, saw the behavior of David, she despised him in her heart. Now more is said of this in 2 Samuel 6, but suffice it to say, she didn't think David was acting like a king. There, David rebuked her for that, saying that he was worshiping God properly, and nothing would stop him from doing that. And of course, from everything we read of here in chapter 15, David was right. The Lord was honored in what was being done because David had done according to the Lord's instruction in moving the ark. There were obviously more instructions concerning the singers and music that we do not have revealed to us. But the contrast to what happened here to that which happened in chapter 13, we can know that God was pleased. Now, does this event here tell us that we can use instruments of music and religious dancing in our worship and be pleasing to God today? Well, we must first remember two things. First, this was a special occasion, the moving of the Ark of the Covenant. This was not daily temple worship, though that too would have instrumental music. Which brings us to the second thing. God is glorified today under the new covenant. There is no Ark of the Covenant, no temple, no animal sacrifices, none of those things with which we worship God. Christ, in dying on the cross, ushered in the new covenant, and therefore we must walk by faith in obeying it if we are to be pleasing to God. And Ephesians 5:19 tells us that when we sing, making melody in our hearts to the Lord, in other words, without musical instruments, that God is glorified then. The absence of instrumental music in the New Testament, given its constant mention in the Old Testament, is striking. That absence should cause us to draw the obvious distinction, that being that God doesn't desire such today in worship of Him. What can we learn, then, from events like these? The lesson that proper worship matters to God. When David didn't follow God, God wasn't pleased and consequences followed. When David followed God, God was pleased and blessings followed. May it be so with us as well. We'll learn what happened after the ark came to Jerusalem, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verses 1 to 6, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.